something that's very, I think, integral to our DNA, given where we come from. But also, it helps differentiate your brand. It helps in not having to perhaps in being able to create a disproportionate leverage for your brand, even if you're putting in, say, maybe X amount of effort. You, in time, if you've created a brand, uh, can reap maybe 2x or 3x benefit out of having created that unique differentiation for yourself. So we
So
wanted to.
on this thing, I want to just ask again, because see, a lot of B2B, there's this notion that branding is not that important. I mean, that's what we, when we hear and read about it, because I just want you to maybe comment a little on that, because people may have that question themselves also, that how important is branding in B2B? Because in B2C, we all know it's very important and all that. But what do you think?
Yeah. No, I think it is important. Maybe there's a different route to branding. So, in B2C, it's very important to have emotional associations that
Mm,
you create for your consumers with your
yeah.
brand, because a lot of purchase that happens, in somewhat an irrational, impulsive fashion in B2C. But in
Mm,
B2B, of course, the purchasing journey is more rational. Your
mm,
customers want to read more, want to understand better. But at the same time, like I said, the objective of branding in B2B is to differentiate. It's
mm,
basically
mm,
to very clearly put out what it is that you stand for, so that there is no confusion. When they know what you stand for, what your offering is, at what point should they be using an offering like yours. And even if you are not communicating, so the whole point of that leverage you create is, if you keep saying the same thing consistently in similar ways, 10 times, the
mm,
11th time you need not say it. The 11th
mm.
time, your audience will know what it is that you stand for, and so you can sort of get that disproportionate leverage. So that would be the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think you were talking about our
Yeah.
journey. So yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
yeah. So those were our objectives. Now, I think what emerged from like I said, the work that we were already doing and had done was what it is that our core proposition was, what it is that our core offering was, and for us that was, like I said, part-time talent, project-based talent that is high quality, that is delivered via extremely cost-effective and agile models. So, in a nutshell, this was our primary proposition. Uh,
Mm,
it can happen, today, because we are a lot of offerings today, that, or a lot of spaces that startups play in are a convergence of multiple benefits. So it
mm,
can happen that you find that you have 5 things to talk about. So how do you arrive at that one
mm,
sort of thing which is core? So firstly, you have to have sort of a prioritization in your head. But secondly, what is also good to know is that you can have a primary and a secondary proposition. So you can have one that you would, no matter what, always talk about, but you can mix and intersperse your secondary proposition with some of your primary propositions. So for example, for us, the secondary proposition would be the fact that our selection process is you know
mm,
is what we've invested a lot of thinking behind, and as a consequence of that, the talent that we give to our businesses is highly vetted and very well matched. So that would be, say, a secondary proposition. So while a lot of our marketing communication would be around the primary proposition, which is what we deliver, some of our communication will also be around how we deliver it, which is our secondary proposition. So it's good to understand what your prioritization is,
mm.
of what you bring to the table. And the second most important thing, in fact, I would say this is the most important thing in marketing, is, and Rashmi will also talk about it, is the target audience, who you are speaking to. Everything flows from there. How you speak, where you speak, your language, a lot of it flows from, that person. And you can imagine your target audience is that one person that you're speaking to. Everything flows from there. So you have to, sort of have to be clear in your head about who your target audience is. For us, again, here also you can have 2-3 different buckets, because any business would not maybe be catering to only one segment. Any business would have core segments and fringe segments, and which is why this exercise is important, and marketing frameworks force you to make those choices. You have to zero in on that one target audience segment around which most of your marketing communication will be designed. And for us, that was startups. So while we do a fair bit of business with larger companies as well, we were clear that our offering makes the most sense, is the most valuable and value adding to startups and other small businesses such as ours, other small and growing businesses such as ours, and which is why we decided to keep our core TG as startups. And then, of course, comes the customer problem that you're trying to solve. Again, it's good to sort of zero in on that, one problem, one or two problems that you think are the most critical for your target audience for you to solve. And then from there flow your differentiated benefits. And from all of this will flow the single most important point that you want to create, you want to talk about. In fact, when I was with Unilever, there was an abbreviation for this. It was SMIP, single most important point. There was actually, this was a concept that we had to, for every brief, write down what was the single most important point that we wanted to talk about. And that for us is the thing that I said at the beginning, our core USP, our core proposition, which is that we deliver high quality part-time and project-based talent to businesses. So that I think some of these these exercises, these frameworks, and there are a lot of frameworks which can help businesses arrive at these this USP and the benefits, is what is the start point for any marketing activity to begin.
So this is like the strategy part of the thinking part that you have just described to us on the marketing side. Okay.
Yeah.
Then
so there is a little bit more on the thinking, that, or rather only one point on the thinking that I do want to cover, which is that again, and this is another framework actually that can help you think through what your communication should be. So there are two broad categories of messaging. So one is the market development kind of messaging, where you are trying to create the category. You are trying to make your consumers or customers aware of what this product or service that you're selling even is. And before you came along, perhaps they didn't even have that, an idea of that. So
in this place, right? Many startups are in that space.
Many startups would be in that space. It is by design, in a startup, innovative space to be in. And the other one is the superiority segment, where there are other players in the category that you are playing in, but you come with, say, a differentiation. You come with a unique way to deliver that same benefit or to solve that same problem. And a lot of, say for example, e-commerce today would be in this space. A lot of e-commerce there, because e-commerce has existed, but there are newer players perhaps who are coming with their own niches and their own differentiation. So you have to also know which part you're playing in, and a lot of your communication and thinking and messaging will flow from there, and a lot of your even marketing approach, the spends you will do, and the speed at which you will do those spends will flow from whether you are building the category or you are trying to create superiority in the category. So yeah.
Cool. I think then are you going to now talk a little bit on execution on some of this, or how do we translate this thinking? You told us the strategy thinking around marketing.
Yeah.
And how does it translate into what happens in digital?
So on digital media. So I think this thinking will hold you through a good part of creating themes around what you want to talk about. So here again, there is another framework that I want to talk about, which is in our past lives, or in my past life, some of what we used to do used to be centered around the framework of, say, an insight, a reason to believe, and a benefit delivery. So that was how we used to write out, say, our concepts. This was B2C when I was with Unilever. That's how we would write out our concepts. And the thing with a B2C advertising is that whatever that piece of advertising is that finally emerges from all of this all of these activities, you everything has to concisely fit in that piece of advertising, because that one piece will be played at very high frequency across all your touch points. So everything has to fit there. The good thing about digital channels is that you can separate it out. So in the same piece of marketing or communication, you don't need to talk about all three aspects. But it's important for a startup to give a think to what it is that these three buckets represent for them. So for example, I would say that the insight basically is the problem that you're trying to solve. That is what you need to think about. The second thing is the reason to believe is the credibility factor, and that for a B2B business is very, very important, because customers in B2B are making rational choices. They want to read more. They want to understand why they should use your offering. They want to understand more about how you've gone around about creating it. There's a lot of material that you can create in the B2B environment, and you should create it. So that would be, say, the analogous content to, say, the reason to believe, and of course benefits. I mean, you can either there are two ways to always talk about what you can deliver. You can either talk about the problem and say you have a solution, or you can focus more on the benefits that you provide, and both are legitimate ways of doing it. So this framework basically gives many different themes. It can give you many different themes, and the next step, which is creating a sort of calendar, which is the first step of going on that execution journey for marketing, comes from this. So you have your themes in place. You know that you want to talk about what the problem is for your target audience. You want to talk about certain credibility building factors that your business has, and you want to talk about the benefits then, which can help your customers really see what it is that they get from your offering. So all of these are themes that you can then use to create your calendar. So for example, for us, what it is that we our problem statement, one of our problem statements is that as a startup, do you wish to hire experienced talent, but perhaps find them unaffordable? That is a problem statement, and there itself the creative asset can start. And then there can be a response to it and say, but now you can get really experienced talent through affordable part-time models from FlexiBees. So that would be, say, an asset that would fit in the problem bucket. Credibility creation. So there are multiple things that you can do, and we ourselves do multiple things. So for example, we talk about the people that we have or the roles that we have fulfilled in the recent past. Because it's it gives a relatable hook to businesses who read our material. So when we say, we can keep talking about hiring experienced talent, but when you say, do you want a sales professional with who has domain expertise, but will come in a more affordable model through through part-time model or through a project-based model, then that can resonate at a different frequency, because it might spark off an idea in your head that is what you need at that point. So that could be one way to create resonance, and of course credibility as well, because the space that we are in, we have the additional task. We are category builders basically for flexible talent, and we have the additional task to tell our audiences that a lot of roles which they thought could not be done in a flexible way can actually be done in a flexible way. So a lot of times people ask us that, part-time talent, so does that mean data entry, does that mean content writing? And while there's nothing that we have against data entry and content writing, and content writing is something that I personally love, but the world is full of various kinds of skilled people, and there are women who are and men who are experienced in marketing and strategy and finance and investment banking. And why must all of them do data entry and content writing just because it's part time or it's project based? So we have done roles in areas as diverse as, like I said, investment banking, for boutique investment banks, in high quality content writing, or very high quality branding or marketing or digital marketing. Some of these roles that or operational roles as well, and some of these are roles that people would not have earlier thought could be done in a part-time or project-based fashion, but here we are. So it's important for us to talk about this. That's our way to building credibility. So we talk a lot about that. So that's another sort of piece of content under the credibility building bucket. And as far as benefits go, lots of benefits. There are multiple benefits that we talk about. We talk about how you can hire somebody at 40 to 60% of the cost. We talk about how you can save 90% of the time while hiring, because we do that work of selecting the right talent for you. So a lot of these benefits that we've culled and created over time from our own data and statistics go into the benefit bucket. And that's basically how the content calendar is created. And as far as the content calendar is concerned, a couple of things over here. So it's important to build consistency. So in marketing in general, important to build consistency so that people remember you, so that you stand for something. There is ownership. And you should, in the content calendar, also try and build consistency, because it just becomes easier for everyone, becomes simpler. For example, you can have properties. So this we have created properties out of everything. So recently placed is for us is a property. Client testimonials for us is a property. Flexibee's benefits for us is a property. So we it's a shorthand for us to also talk to each other and understand. It's also a way for us to quickly be able to construct a calendar and be able to sort of make sure that all of these buckets are being adhered to, and we are routinely touching upon each of these important pillars every month or every week, whatever our frequency is. So
on the consistency point, great point, but there's also sometimes a counterpoint on would consistency lead to boredom, and not, would there not be variety? How would you, how as a marketer do you balance that?
That's very interesting, because I think you have to keep doing new stuff. So it's all about balance, right? So that's where creating a property also helps, because the property caters to the objective. So if you have, say, a Flexibee's benefits property, that caters to the objective of showing your customers what they can get. But within that property, you can do different kinds of content. So you can do those things. You can either
it comes from the property, but then you have the different cuts of it, and that's how you bring variety in. And so
and it also helps you see how different pieces of content are doing, and some may do better than the previous one, and you need to keep trying out new things to do better and better at your engagement or your responses.
So then you talked to us about the strategy thinking. Then you also talked about how all this comes together into themes, and then calendar and different types of property ideas. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in the whole marketing and communication angle for the B2B?
I think a couple of things. So one very interesting thing that happened early on with me, I remember this very clearly, was I was speaking to a few people, and I realized that some content that we had put out, they were referring to when they spoke to me, and they kept talking about, or not kept talking about, but they mentioned it, that, we saw that you have, you do this kind of role too. So can I also get somebody in that same space? So it's very important to sort of listen to your customers, because a lot of your marketing ideas will come from there. You will see what has resonated with them, and you can build it into your marketing plan. So that And finally, I think offline marketing, yes, because we are talking marketing here, so there is an element of offline, but for most of us, small and growing companies, offline marketing is really expensive.
We won't be able to afford it.
We won't be able to afford it. Yeah, I mean, the people who are advertising on IPL and all, I mean, those are, a long way away for most of us. We should aspire to to those anyway, but till that time comes, some channels that you can explore are, of course, events. Be present at events, have marketing material present there as well, and the events also themselves provide opportunities. You can exhibit, you can talk, you can do some of those things. And the PR is another way you can do it. And even if it is not via any paid sources, you at the beginning yourself can cultivate contacts or with journalists. And the print PR is always a good idea, very authentic, wide reaching, and we've seen it. It does lead to business coming in, leads coming in.
Yeah.
So I think that would be from me on some of the marketing and communication part. And we can move to now the digital marketing part, which is bringing all of this alive on our digital media. So yeah, over to Rashmi. So Rashmi, do you want to talk about our journey?
Yeah, the parallel journey that so Shreya talked about, how we went through the thinking on the marketing. At the same time, I think we were kind of executing it in digital, in the digital world. So how most bootstrap startups also start out this way. Sometimes most of them don't even have a website. Even we didn't. I think in our first 6 months of existence, we pretty much ran with our Facebook page, and we didn't even put the investment in to build our website. So that, but for B2B, I think it's all very critical to have a website. So in the initial time, that's the other thing. I think I may have to explain this a little bit, where we may be a little different. We are a B2B startup. Our clients are B2B, our businesses, but we do cater to a certain B2C audience, which is the women whom we want to bring and place. So we actually have a complex challenge in our marketing, that we have to cater to both. Some of you may have this, most of you may not have. Most B2B startups usually typically have a B2B side only. So some of our choices reflect that. So I just want to say that, so that it doesn't get confusing later when I talk about some B2C and B2B channels separately. But for B2B, once we started really wanting to focus on our B2B, initially we were just getting our business from mostly networks, and we weren't thinking of, we were too small basically to start, building the online presence. When we started building the online presence, yes, we definitely, we set up our website, and which all of you would have or would be doing, or if you're thinking of starting, then you should do. And as is with any website setting up at that time, it's mandatory. You have to do a good round of SEO kind of optimization, audit and optimization, on page, off page, fairly standard things. But before you do this, also you should have a good sense of your space, your competitors, the keywords you want to go. So those analysis, keyword analysis, these are all very basic things, and typically you will have to do a very intensive round of this work when you start out. Okay, and we did that also. So that takes around 3 months or so, 2 to 3 months for you to set it all up properly, so that your website is as optimized as can be. Of course, you will be small, so do not expect that you will be ranked very high as you start. All that doesn't happen. It does take some time, but you have to do the best you can in all of these efforts. We won't talk too much on execution in this call, but these are things you have to do and make sure it gets done. You don't have to do it yourself. You always can get other people to do it, but definitely this has to be done. And we also did that. And around this time, I think we also started thinking very much about our target audience. I think before you do anything in any channel, on any platform choices that you make, anything, you'll have to think about your target audience. So in our case, like Shreya explained, we did know that startups are our target audience. Those are our core audience, and small and medium-sized businesses. That's the other kind of audience, that set of small growing companies, as Shreya described. Now in B2B, I think one thing, it can overwhelm us sometimes because we are all it's somehow easier for us to imagine people in B2C as target audiences. It's just easier because it's like a mother who has a small child, or a teenager, or an old person. They're easy descriptors, whereas in B2B it doesn't seem easy. One way to think about which helps you in the targeting is also that ultimately, even if this is companies, you are targeting companies, but you're targeting people within companies at the end of the day. So your channels may change. All of that may change, but at the end of the day, these are also people. So it is somebody. So like Shreya said, even for digital marketing, we boil it down to, for example, I know that I'm looking to talk to in my digital marketing efforts more founders, more startup founders, co-founders, who are all in similar positions as we are, but in small as well as growing startups. They are people at the end of the day. Or if you want, some of you who are doing, you're doing, say, a technology B2B product, you may be targeting the CTOs of companies because those may be the people who buy what you are selling. If you're doing enterprises, depending on what function your product serves for the enterprise, you're targeting a different person of that company, right? So boil it down to the person, and that's what even we did. So we did we figured out our target audience. We also then this this main thing about this target audience informs what all platforms you want to go in, and channels, platform, channel, publisher. These are all words you can interchangeably use. What I'm meaning is uh, uh, LinkedIn versus Twitter versus Facebook versus Instagram. These choices, do you want to do all? Do you want to do some? Where do you want to be? Where do you not want to be? These choices also you start making early. The moment you set up your website and all, also you start making these choices, because every choice is a cost in some sense, right? You can do everything, but then do you really have to do everything? That should not be your approach. Your approach should be, okay, I need to go and find these kind of businesses. Where would I find them? So, and then find your audience. Mostly B2B. Typically, the typical platforms are LinkedIn, Twitter to some degree, because a lot of activity happens and they're more professional, slightly more professional. Twitter sometimes can be topical versus not, but it's still a decently professional kind of platform. Typically, B2B doesn't focus a lot on Facebook and Instagram. These are the typical choices. You can have differences, okay? Depending on your business, may have a special thing where you may be able to find some of even your B2B target on some of these platforms. It's not impossible, but I'm saying these are the typical choices. The other choice that we made is, which again, I would say, if you're a B2B startup, you should make the choices. You should do email marketing. You should do it. It's a very important thing to do. It's also quite effective. It works differently than other channels. It's not just putting out content. It's not somewhere that you just go and post, or you make your own company's page and keep posting on your. No, that's not how email marketing. It works a little differently, but it still has some commonalities as a calendar. Like, once you create those themes, for us also, we all, everything that Shreya said, all those calendars themes flow into most of all, I mean, all the channels that we are doing it, but we have to choose. So we do. So that's the after we figure out our target audience, then from that we got into, these are our channel choices. And some channels we know are part of our choice, but we are not yet there. For example, you can do them later also. Again, as a startup, I think we're always choosing because we don't have time to do everything, or bandwidth to do everything, or money to do everything. It could be a mix of all this. For another popular kind of B2B choice is like Quora. We haven't got around to doing it. Some of it, there's also YouTube is also not a bad choice. Again, it's a little challenging again because it's an expensive platform and there's a lot of competition with B2C there in YouTube. But there is a certain, um, um, options to go there also. So we did that. So we figured out our target audience, we figured out our channel choices. Then for every channel, you'll have different formats that work in them. ad formats or content formats, not even ads, content formats. Now, formats, you should know these also. Uh, the simple stuff is things like size and shape. They're also, of course, important, but they're simple. They're very widely available to you. You can find them online. What are the sizes that, LinkedIn has a rectangular format, 1200 into 628. Facebook and Insta are more squares. These are fairly simple to find. But when I mean format, I don't mean this. I actually mean things like, for example, should you do image, should you do a video, should you do a carousel, which is in LinkedIn looks like a slideshow, right? The more professional looking one. These are also format choices. I think as a digital marketer, that's important for you to know these choices so that you can also tell your content people or your marketing people. They are building the content, but unless they know what formats to build for a certain platform, that's the knowledge that the digital marketer has to bring in. And then we have to inform the team and say that, hey, these are the options. Think of your themes and your creators would buy if they fit into these formats, they would be good, because some formats work well and work better for some of the channels that we have or the platforms that we have. The other thing which is very interesting, I find sometimes, is all the time there are newer formats coming up. Okay, so it's not like the format is like done and dusted. No, and a lot of the time, what happens is new formats. Platforms generally keep promoting them because they're new. So these things are small hacks you should know. As I think it's good if you're in this space, you should keep updated and know also. And what happens is when they promote them, then you piggyback on that. You release a few things in that format so that when the platform is promoting it, that means you'll get some organic boosts in in viewership of if you do a certain format. This happened when, for example, now LinkedIn is trying out LinkedIn stories, very new. They're just beta testing it. But if you do one now, they will want to. They'll be looking for who are these people who are putting out this type of content. Let me then see how, because they want to test it. They'll show it to a greater audience. These things happen. Even Instagram, for example, stories started like that, but it's doing well. So now it's continuing to do well. So now Instagram stories is part of everybody's rep. I mean, if you're on Instagram, you will do stories. Again, it's more of B2C there. Since we are in B2B, so things like even videos, GIFs. I think LinkedIn forever used to be a very text and an image kind of format. For the longest time, a lot of text and even image. That's probably how LinkedIn traditionally was. But now they are experimenting with a lot of different formats. Looks like videos are actually also working well on LinkedIn. Short videos. When I say videos, in very short ones, not like long videos. But so these are the things that I think we should know, and then we can inform the content and the marketing teams also that these are the options. So this is what kind of we did. So the calendar kind of comes together with, it's an intersection of format and the theme and all of them coming into different creatives that get built finally ultimately in the calendar. The other thing we did after that, so we, for the longest time, I think we figured out these are 2-3 channels. We had our mainstay channels. Again, like I said, we had a unique challenge. We had to separate the B2B and B2C. So we separated our channels also. So we did our B2B content mostly on B2B channels, which is LinkedIn, Twitter and all. And we kept our Facebook and Insta more for B2C. It was a strategic call we took. And I think it has helped us because it makes sense for us to do it that way. And we then continued to do a lot of organic posting on all the channels. So the calendar that Shreya had referred, we they built the calendar, they gave us a bunch of themes to which we put together, and then we made sure that there's a good rhythm of posting and all of that. At the same time, we also had an email program for which we built our database. We're continuing to build our database. Those things you will have to do in B2B again. You can start your email program with your client base itself, and that client base also grows as your business grows, right? And or your contacts. You have clients and you have people who didn't become clients and all of those things, you can do that. That's how most people start their databases. Some people even buy databases. You can do that. Again, it depends on who you're targeting. If you're targeting enterprises in B2B, maybe makes sense to buy. You may get a very good set of even email IDs which you can buy from providers who sell them, which and it's okay to do. But for us, we found it was not very effective because we were after startups and people did not have ready-made databases and things like that. So you can do those. And the other thing you can so we did all of those things. Then we've been running our digital mostly. I think we've been doing only kind of organic stuff. The other thing is the thing around SEO and keywords and all. I think though you do it one time in the beginning, you have to continue refreshing it all the time. You cannot just leave it. You have to every maybe 3 months or so figure out that is there something that your page is not doing well on some keywords it's not coming up at all, and what you need to beef up your content on. Make sure then that your blogs have those things. Make sure you put the tags in, all of those things. It's an ongoing journey. So that one also we continue doing. I think around this time we've been more or less doing organic, and we are now moving into the stage where we want to experiment with paid, and that's I would say that in B2B it's a little more challenging because it's more expensive for sure. There's no doubt about it. It's definitely like, and it's an expensive in terms of orders, right? And it's like into 100 into 1,000 times of what a B2C spend is on a per click or a per impression. That's it's into 10 into 100. That's how it moves in B2B. So paid stuff is expensive for sure. That's why I think it's important that you do small experiments, pilots, MVPs on paid stuff. If you're not funded yet, if you're in bootstrap mode, I think do experiments, and in the experiments do some A/B testing and things like that. On paid, again, not getting into too much execution, but a large. If I want to, should I give a little bit basic around paid stuff? Maybe I should.
Yeah.
So on paid, for example, basically any type of, again, all platforms and channels are different in different ways. Actual execution of campaign and all is different, but conceptually they're all very similar. Either you pay for impressions, or you pay for clicks, or you pay for conversions. This is pretty much it. There are pretty much three big types of buying in the digital space, and it's basically an upward chart of price and cost. So it's like impressions are the cheapest to buy, clicks are more expensive, conversions are the most expensive to buy. So it's like so it's about what you want to do, what your business objective is, and how much you're willing to spend, and that balance you have to find. So you can, and in B2B, in B2C also it's the same way, the costs are the same way, but the B2B, the thing is it's just multiplied, so it's much more expensive to even start with. So that's how you make your choices on pay. I mean, depending on what you want to do. If you want conversions, if you want leads, you can even buy on conversion, and you can even, but it may be too expensive for you if you're bootstrapped. So I feel like experiment your way, run pilots, do these things, find out how your acquisition, lead acquisition cost is fitting out on all these three types of buys, and then finally arrive at what you want to do. And once you get funded, then only I would advise to go and do a lot of paid stuff in B2B, especially simply because it's just a little more expensive. So I feel like being bootstrapped and running digital advertising on B2B is very challenging. I think on B2C you can still pull it off because it's still not that expensive, but I would say being bootstrapped is hard in B2B to do advertising paid ones. But you always have the other thing is, I think we were on organic for like close to 3 years. We hadn't done any paid almost on our B2B. But what that has done for us is, I think it gives you a very good foundation on whatever you're going to do after this. If you're going to now foray into paid things, it's good that you have done a lot of organic digital marketing to know what is working. Like to Shreya's thing, there are so many benefits you can actually play up. But today, now when we're starting to do our experiments on paid and tentatively stepping into it and experimenting with it, we already know what are our key 2-3 messages we want to maybe even experiment with. We don't need to now do that learning because we've done for 3 years and different organic ways. We figured out which is this brings me to a very important point. Whatever on digital you do, however small your effort is, however what do you say, little bit of engagement or impressions only you are getting, even if it is small, you have to measure and track and analyze a little bit of what you're doing. Definitely you have to do it. It's very easy to do simple things. For example, we in our organic stuff, for creators that you put out on any like LinkedIn or Twitter or anything, you can always look at impressions and engagement rate, which is total engagement divided by total impressions. So that shows you which content is more engaging. But impressions itself shows you, total impressions itself shows you which content the platform liked, the platform itself made many people see or many people shared and saw. So those things give you a very good idea of in your organic piece how it works. Similarly, in email campaigns, if you're doing, it's very simple. Look at your open rate, look at your click rate. Typically, open rate is around 15-20% on average. So if you're doing better than that, good. If you're doing worse than that, something is really wrong. You have to fix it. So that's and also sometimes benchmarks won't work for us because we are so small, right? As bootstrap startups, sometimes the benchmarks that you see, you Google and find a benchmark, you'll find, oh my God, the benchmark is big. I mean, I feel like you can't. Then just relatively compare your different creatives. You don't even need to, say none of your emails are getting your 20 or 30 or 40%, but you can at least know which ones are getting 5 and which ones are getting 15. So at least relatively which is working better for you. Those are the things we did when we were smaller, and those are things which we all can do, even with the small impression sizes we have as bootstrap startups, or the small kind of reaches we have. Also we can measure and track, and that definitely gives us it gives us the knowledge of how we're doing. It also, if you have a team working with you, then it gives the team also something to gun for and say, okay, they want to put out better performing content and all that, right? It's still, even if it's small, it's still doing something for you, definitely. So I think that's about it I wanted to talk about in the digitals. Yeah, anything I'm missing, you can tell me. I think there's questions already coming, but I think we have a last section to cover.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
The more interesting questions have come. We'll go to them. Just give us 5 minutes. We'll come to your questions. But let's finish the last section. I think we want to talk about is the team.
Yeah. So Rashmi, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I think the team for one thing I think in digital is there are most people in digital, there is a set of people in digital who are generalists, but there's also some people who are specialists. So there are things, digital is a mix of, all of these things. So it's not a, it's not a one role function at all. And that's how we see it. We see there are multiple roles within the digital gambit, and we ramped up our hiring differently. Also, we have the luxury of our model, right? So for us, it's very easy. For us, we think of roles in bits and pieces because we are so flexible, and that's how we think of it ourselves also. So when we started off, I think we had SEO person. We definitely hired an SEO person, and for the website, and that was a short-term 3-month focused person who can do an on-page, off-page first setup, audit and set up for the first time. That was the brief given to the person, and after that, what happened is we quickly had people who could do a generalist role, which is basically some of what I said. So posting on different platforms, figuring out what the platform is, and at the same time, we also had people to create content. So we had a mix of content. Content we could, even if big pieces, we could just outsource and get it done by content writers who were part of our network. And we also had a graphic designer who had a, because we realized we needed a lot more. We wanted to brand our thing very well. We wanted branded content. We wanted all our content to look similar and have the same feel and all of that, and which is all good. It will stand you in good stead. So we had also graphic design, but for very small amount of time. So because we did not have that much volume as we started doing this, we did not have so much, so much of volume of content to do. So we had we had little amount of time with the graphic designer, a part-time generalist, and then half-time generalist, and then we also had a content writer in bits. Am I missing something? Yeah, this was our.
Yeah. So I think, you've covered it all. I think only one thing I feel over here is that it's important for founders to chip in the marketing.
Correct.
effort.
Yeah.
Because nobody else knows your business, especially in the early days, as well as you do. And marketing is basically knowing your business, your audience very well. So you can do the writing. You can, if you have the skill of designing, you can do the designing, or you can. Nowadays, it's so easy. You can learn Canva. You can use Canva very easily. So in the beginning, basically, you can yourself do it. See what works before hiring
And for the longest time for us, basically, like Shreya was kind of doing the content creation, the writing part in the marketing side, and that gave us a very good. She then, and it was, I think, the right call for us to do, because B2B, again, the marketing is not very easy or straightforward. You have to keep thinking of different ways to put this, her themes thing and all of that, the themes and all she talked about, and also helped us. I think helped her figure out when we hired, she knew what to hire for. Correct. As we evolved though from where I explained. Then we ramped up the team, and we did hire a content person, and we did hire another B2B specialist generalist, because we again expanded so much our work, and B2B is actually a little different in marketing. So in digital, so we did hire someone like that. So for us, it helps. I think we did go and look for some particular specific talent and made a good mix in the team to make that happen. One thing which I do see in talent, because I also handle the recruitment aspect from our company, so we do see that on the other side, is that sometimes clients come to us and say, I want a digital marketer who can do digital marketing in B2B, and who's a digital marketing expert in B2B, who can also write the content for the B2B digital marketing, who can also, and should also know Canva and can do basic graphic design in B2B digital marketing. So this is some of the requirements that come to us. And then this is very problematic, because one, the B2B digital marketing skill is not very prevalent. Okay, it's a very precious skill to get. So then when we try to do the B2B digital marketing skill, and then we may find a very good B2B digital marketer, but that person may specifically not want to do graphic designing, not know Canva, but we may lose that person. But that's the balance that we sometimes struggle with, and we keep telling our clients that, sometimes you don't need to go and find some, the most key skill, make sure we get that. And then the others, you can actually hire a graphic person for 2 hours or something like that. You can do that also. That, because the more critical skill in some of this is you should hire for that skill also. So make sure that, that's something that I wanted to say on team. Shreya, do you have anything else? Yeah.
No, I think we are good. We can answer questions, I think.
Yeah. Let's start the questions. Yes, I think.
Okay.
Shobit, it's in. Yeah.
So the question that Shobit has asked on, how do you identify the correct need? Clarity. Correct. Do you mean to say the correct person?
Lack of knowledge and skills in marketing. So, for hiring a marketing person, is it?
Yeah.
So, at the risk of sounding like a pitch, come to us. But I think what we look for when we ask you this question. So if you were to ask us how to hire, we will ask you who's your target audience, who's your business targeted towards. Is it B2B? Is it B2C? Is it both? Do you need this marketer to be able to market to what kind of audience? So we look for that similar kind of experience. And we'll also ask you for strategy and execution mix you want. I think that's another question we ask. Anything else that help you figure out? I mean, what kind of talent that will fit your needs. You don't need to go and find people in the exact same domain. I think sometimes people do that, but that may be more difficult to find sometimes if you want the exact domain. But you can look at similar targeting if they have done marketing to targets. Then I think that's how we try. We don't sometimes uh, uh, same domain unless it's very unique domain. Like sometimes health and pharma. Sometimes we may look for the same domain, but usually I think we look at targets whether they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, on this one.
No, I think that's good enough. I mean, yeah. Look at these things. Look at the
Yeah.
past work they've done in these spaces, and I think maybe give an assignment, a small assignment
we
to
also
get a
do that
flavor of
in our process.
yeah, not too long and involved an assignment, but a small one that gives you a flavor of what the person's thinking is like, or what their execution thinking is, what their speed of execution is. You can get a flavor.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Yeah,
know,
and separately, I think we have very good marketing talent. So please do get in touch with us if you really.
yeah,
We
yeah,
can really help because
yeah.
we are from a marketing background. Two of us are hardcore marketers, so we do a good job of finding marketing people.
Yeah. And apart from that, this exactly is our strength. The fact we do know that a lot of startups are not multifunctional and they may
Correct.
not know how to hire for every function. And that then we bring to the table. So our selection process that I spoke of earlier is to ensure that we take on this role that startups would find it difficult to do in the absence of an HR team.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Priya asks, how can we rank our websites within 1 month if our competitor has search volume? Is it possible as an organic way? What do you think? Uh, it's uh, it's difficult. Yes, there is no doubt about it. It is difficult, especially if you're in a space which is very competitive and there is a high search volume for your competitor. I think it's not easy. I think the smart way would be to see the in keyword analysis. If you do, there are keywords that are very hugely competed for, correct? And there are competitors that are doing very well also on some of those big keywords. I would say don't target those ones. Those ones it'll be tough for you because those make sure that there'll be a second rung of keywords which are maybe not that hotly competed on. Make sure that then you do well in those because then that'll in your category your particular this thing your ranking will go up based on that. Again, it's a matter of finding that places which are not heavily competed and then making sure that then you do them you do well on those and then you get many good enough volume of that set of not very heavily competed keywords that can help a little bit this thing. But frankly, I think search comes with there is no quick fire way to do search in a good way. Every time anybody figures out a hacky approach to figure the search out, Google will change their algorithm. So I think it's a little bit wasteful for us to try to have this very very high target of reaching in 1 month reaching the top. If it is a heavily competed category, then it's challenging. So I think, yeah, like you said, it's not easy, and I feel like go and do the smarter things, especially if you don't have too much money to spend. If you have money and you're able to do a lot of SEM in addition to smartly doing your SEO, you can do it. But if you don't have money and it's tough if it's a highly competed category, I would say, yeah, be smart around it. You had another question, little bit explain about PR. Huh? Okay.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
PR.
we can combine it with the next one
The next
also.
question, Ruchi's question on
Yeah.
PR works only if you have raised funding. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that is true. But I think there are two, three ways, and we've actually tried a couple of things. So firstly, I think one thing is to you look within your contacts, because there will be, and we are talking here of print PR, right? And even if
No,
even if
that's
it is
digital PR. I think digital PR is also a good one, and that's the one even Ruchi is talking about that they won't. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, but digital PR, the reason I didn't mention it is because digital PR is very highly monetized in many cases.
Wow.
But then
Yeah.
what I'm talking about right now is to you basically find contacts who will or who will carry your article, because they may be interested in your space. So say every business newspaper will have journalists with their own beats and who do certain kinds of articles, so they do cover certain kind of themes. So if you know people in the media industry, perhaps you can figure out who you can talk to, and if you can get in, you can talk to them. Basically it is a little bit of a slow burn. You will
Yeah.
have to interest them in your space. Next time when they are covering, say for us, say the flexi working industry, then they may reach out to us. Or
Yeah.
they may already be also doing making yourself present in general helps, because people who know journalists who are covering, say, your industry will then connect you to them. And that's also happened with us. So through some of these contacts, some that we've come across, some that we've built, some that other people have connected us, we've been able to get a few, a few people cover us in various
Yeah.
places. Yeah, so a print and the digital equivalent, basically. So that's one way in which you can perhaps do it. The second way that we tried recently was to hire somebody who is from a PR background and basically
Yeah.
has those connects.
They have
And
the contacts and the connects. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they have the contacts and the connects, and they can then go and figure out which are the right publications for you. And this can work really well with digital media, and not maybe with the most monetized digital media, because those of course require the big money, but slightly second tier digital media, where they have good contacts, and they can it's a barter. I mean, you give your piece and the publication gets content. Basically that's how it mutually works for both ends. So we did that recently, and it was good. And the thing that it does is, even if it is a second tier publication, it gets you into the news. So a lot of times people who are reading it will not really pay attention to which publication is carrying it. Now, of course, if it is some really well known publication, it does propel you in a different league. But even a not so well known publication will get you some results, will get you a lot of eyeballs, a lot of kudos, a lot
And
of,
people will share it also.
yeah, people will share it. Yeah,
People may share it to others.
yeah,
They,
yeah.
yeah. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So compare it to if you were to write it yourself on your own blog.
Mm.
If if that is your comparison benchmark, then any third party publisher, even if they are not so well known, talking about you is definitely notches better.
Yeah.
So this can be one way of doing it, and this is not very expensive to hire somebody. This can also be on a part-time basis, etc. So that the cost goes down. And of course, the third and fourth options are more expensive ones.
Yeah,
Then,
you just
which
pay.
are, yeah, the paid digital media
Mm.
packages, and the then going via a PR agency, which is the pinnacle of all expensive PR options. Yeah, so these would be maybe a couple of ways in which you can try getting yourself covered.
Yeah. I think Ruchi's asked another question. Okay, could you suggest some ways to improve your presence on LinkedIn for B2B market? So yes. Um, okay, I'll take up and then
Yeah.
add on. So on uh, uh, do the basics for sure on LinkedIn. Basics are setting up your page properly, setting up fill everything, put all the info about your company, all of that. Those are basic stuff. Even having a regular calendar is basic only. You need to have a regular posting calendar for LinkedIn also. And it's, typically 3 posts a week we do. You can choose to do a little more also, depending. But these are, but it takes time to build the presence. Yes, I think for the one important thing you should do is to use your founders networks and all to build the initial followership of your page and your business on LinkedIn, so that you start coming in people's. You have to use your personal networks and your founders personal networks if you're not the founder, and they have to use. And also I think you have to use a little bit of the founders personal branding. Some part of that can combine some posts that all of you, for example, should share your pages post. Even use your employees networks. Yeah, everybody, the more organically you share and people start liking, sharing, commenting, then the organic presence of LinkedIn definitely improves on B2B. The other thing, there are also things like groups on LinkedIn. What we have from our experience, I think it's good to go figure out, be present in some of them. They are not as active. For example, Facebook groups are very, very active. So there's far more engagement on some of those. On LinkedIn also, there are some of those things. There are groups, but we found it to be very less in terms of activity. But I think initially, if you are trying to go and build your presence, yes, you can try to even participate in some of those. But I think regular posting, using networks of everybody in the company, making them like, share, comment, those things are the way to organically build your presence. And once in a while, I think if you can do a few paid things, even small ones, for some certain specific purposes, they will also influence your overall, presence and of your page itself on LinkedIn. Because um, which platform doesn't like people spending money on it? Everybody likes it. So there is some, it's not statistically proven, but we've noticed that the more you do some here and there, some activity, you could boost some post. Or if you're running a webinar, for example, you can run an ad for signups, or you could release a report. The type of content you put on LinkedIn also, yes, I think very important. That maybe Shreya will talk a little bit more about expert level content, good blogs where you're actually saying solid stuff, all of those things, and different variety and calendar, different themes and all that. But these are things I think you have to do when you're, at least not when you don't have enough of the presence.
Yeah.
Anything that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I think the content, of course you have to, I think this is part of your content strategy itself for B2B. It has to be deep content, or at least a part of it has to be deep content. So we actually do a good mix. We do certain short creatives as well, which are more eyeball grabbing. And we also do deep content like blogs, some pieces which are in between, like infographics. So have a good mix of it. The B2B audience likes to read and understand. But of course, at the same time, like Rashmi said earlier, they're all people. So if they find something very engaging, which is short but sticky, then that also helps in them remembering your brand. I think one point that I want to definitely make, that is important, and Rashmi touched upon it, is the founder themselves, seeing themselves as a vessel for the company. So that's extremely important. At least one of the founders should have good presence on LinkedIn, or try and make that presence, because at the end of the day, a business page is a business page. Even on LinkedIn, people engage more with personal profiles. With they like hearing stories. They like hearing your experiences. So if you are putting yourself out there, talking about what your company stands for, or what even, it need not always be what your company stands for. I mean, you have to find the balance between being authentic and, talking about what your company stands for a founder. Both, actually both of these are one and the same very often. So you should, as a founder, put yourself out there and talk about your content, talk about things which are important to you, and that can really help in people knowing about your company, and even going to your company page and following the company page then after that. So that's very important as well to build presence.
I think any other questions, guys? I think we're done now. We overshot time for sure. Okay. No other questions, huh? I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, great then. Thanks a lot, guys, for coming and for these questions.
Yeah.
Good
Thank
fun.
you.
Yeah. Thanks. See
Thank
you.
you. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.